The sun was setting over the quiet suburb of Maplewood, casting long shadows across the streets and filling the air with a warm orange glow. It had been a long day for Nicole Carter, an FBI agent who had spent hours chasing leads on a high-profile case involving organized crime. Her mind was still racing with details as she pulled her sedan into a small gas station near the edge of town. She needed to refuel before heading back to headquarters where stacks of files and reports awaited her. Nicole stepped out of her car and stretched briefly, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders from sitting behind the wheel for so long. Imao, gas station wasn't busy. Just a few cars parked nearby, their drivers either filling up or browsing inside the convenience store. Everything seemed calm and ordinary. But that sense of normalcy didn't last long. As Nicole opened her car door, wider to grab her wallet, she heard heavy footsteps approaching. Turning slightly, she saw a man in a police uniform walking toward her. His nameplate read Miller, and his expression was anything but friendly. Officer Greg Miller stopped a few feet away, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He glared at Nicole like she'd done something wrong, even though all she'd done was park at the pump. "You're too close to the curb," Miller barked, his voice sharp and accusatory. "You can't just pull in here like you own the place." Nicole blinked, surprised by the sudden confrontation. She glanced down at her car, which was perfectly aligned with the painted lines on the pavement. There was no way she was violating any rules. Still, she kept her tone polite and calm. "I'm sorry if it looked like I wasn't paying attention, but I'm within the markings," she said, gesturing toward the ground. "Is there a problem?" Miller's scowl deepened. He took a step closer, his boots crunching against the asphalt. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "You think you're above the rules or something? Move your car." Nicole felt a flicker of irritation but pushed it aside. Dealing with difficult people came with the job, especially in law enforcement. She decided to stay professional. "Officer, I assure you my vehicle is parked correctly. If you'd like, we can measure the distance together to confirm." Instead of responding reasonably, Miller let out a derisive laugh. "Oh, now you're giving me orders? Who do you think you are?" His tone carried an edge of mockery, and Nicole couldn't help but notice how dismissive he sounded. Something about the way he looked at her made her feel uneasy, not because of his authority, but because of the disdain written all over his face. Before Nicole could reply, Miller's eyes landed on the badge clipped to her belt. It gleamed faintly in the fading sunlight, unmistakably marked with the letters FBI. For a moment his expression faltered, and Nicole thought he might finally realize he was dealing with someone who outranked him. Instead, his sneer returned, sharper than ever. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, pointing at the badge. "A joke? You really expect me to believe some black woman is an FBI agent?" Nicole froze, taken aback by the blatant disrespect. She hadn't expected racism to rear its ugly head during such a routine stop. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself to remain composed. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. "This isn't a joke," she said firmly. "I am Special Agent Nicole Carter with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Here's my identification if you'd like to verify it." She reached for her wallet, moving deliberately to avoid alarming him, but Miller didn't seem interested in verification. Instead, he scoffed loudly, shaking his head. "Yeah, right. Like they'd let someone like you into the bureau. Stop wasting my time and move your car." Nicole's jaw tightened. She hated being underestimated, particularly when it came to her profession. Being an FBI agent required years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. Things she'd poured her entire life into. Yet here was this man, dismissing her accomplishments based solely on the color of her skin. It stung, but she refused to let it show. "Officer Miller," she began again, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "I understand you're doing your job, but I assure you, I haven't broken any laws. My vehicle is parked legally and I am conducting official business. If you have concerns, feel free to contact my supervisor." Miller's face twisted further into a mask of contempt. "Supervisor? Oh, sure, call your supervisor. Bet they're real proud of you playing dress-up." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Listen, lady, I don't care what kind of game you're running here, but you're not fooling anyone. Now move your damn car, or else." The threat hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Nicole's heart rate quickened, though she did her best to hide it. Years of training kicked in as she assessed the situation. Miller was escalating unnecessarily, and his body language suggested he might act impulsively. She needed to de-escalate while protecting herself. "I'm not going anywhere until you acknowledge that I've done nothing wrong," Nicole replied, keeping her tone measured. "If you continue to harass me without cause, I will document this interaction and report it accordingly." That only made Miller angrier. His hand twitched, hovering near the holster on his hip. For a split second, Nicole wondered if he would actually draw his weapon. Then, to her disbelief, he did exactly that. The metallic click of the gun leaving its holster echoed through the otherwise peaceful evening. Nicole's instincts screamed at her to react, but she forced herself to stay still. Slowly, she raised her hands, palms facing outward, to show she posed no threat. "Officer Miller, please put your weapon down," she said evenly. "This is completely unnecessary. I am a federal agent, and you are violating protocol by threatening me without justification." But Miller wasn't listening. His grip tightened around the handle of his firearm as he pointed it directly at Nicole's chest. "Shut up," he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "You think flashing that fake badge makes you untouchable? You're nobody. You hear me? Nobody." The absurdity of the situation hit Nicole like a punch to the gut. Here she was, a decorated FBI agent, being held at gunpoint by a local cop who refused to recognize her authority. Worse still, she knew that situations like this rarely ended well for people who looked like her. Every instinct told her to fight back, to assert her dominance and demand respect. But she also knew that making a wrong move could cost her everything. Instead, Nicole focused on staying calm and calculating. She subtly activated a small recording device hidden in her lapel, a precaution she always took during fieldwork. The tiny gadget would capture every word exchanged between them, providing undeniable evidence of Miller's misconduct. With her hand still raised, she spoke again, choosing her words carefully. "Officer Miller, I am Special Agent Nicole Carter with the FBI," she repeated, enunciating each syllable clearly. "Under federal law, drawing a weapon on a federal officer without probable cause constitutes a felony offense. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions before this escalates further." For a brief moment, Miller hesitated. The mention of legal consequences seemed to give him pause, but his pride quickly reasserted itself. "Save your fancy talk. For someone who cares," he spat. "Nobody's gonna believe you over me." Nicole swallowed hard, knowing he was probably right, at least in the short term. Cops like Miller often got away with behavior like this because of systemic biases embedded in the justice system. But Nicole wasn't just anyone. She had built her career on fighting those biases, on proving that competence and integrity mattered more than prejudice. And she wasn't about to let Miller win. As the standoff continued, Nicole scanned the area for potential witnesses. A young couple stood near the entrance of the convenience store, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. An older man sat in his truck a few spaces away, gripping the steering wheel nervously. Even though they weren't stepping in to intervene, their presence gave Nicole hope. Someone would remember this moment, and that memory could become crucial later on. "Officer Miller," Nicole said again, her voice firm but controlled. "I urge you to holster your weapon immediately. This situation is spiraling out of control, and it doesn't have to end this way. Let's resolve this peacefully." Miller's response was a bitter laugh. "Peacefully? You think you're in charge here? Newsflash, sweetheart, you're not calling the shots." The use of the condescending term sweetheart grated on Nicole's nerves, but she bit back her retort. Arguing with him would only fuel his aggression. Instead, she shifted her focus to buying time. Backup would arrive soon if she could hold out long enough. All she needed to do was stay alive and keep recording. Minutes ticked by like hours, each one stretching endlessly under the weight of tension. Just when Nicole thought things couldn't get worse, the sound of sirens pierced the air. To patrol, cars pulled into the gas station, their lights flashing brightly against the dusk sky. Relief washed over Nicole as she recognized the insignia of the Maplewood Police Department. Reinforcements had arrived, and with them, a chance to turn the tables on Miller once and for all. Though the ordeal wasn't over yet, Nicole allowed herself a small, inward smile. No matter how this ended, one thing was certain: justice would prevail. The arrival of the two patrol cars brought a mix of emotions for Nicole. Relief washed over her as she realized help was finally here, but there was still an undeniable tension in the air. Officer Greg Miller, who had been holding her at gunpoint just moments earlier, now looked uneasy. His grip on the weapon tightened and his eyes darted between Nicole and the approaching officers. For the first time since the confrontation began, he seemed unsure of himself. Two figures stepped out of the patrol cars. One was a younger man with short brown hair and a clean-shaven face, Officer Ryan Clark. The other was Detective Laura Hayes, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. Both wore their uniforms with pride, though they carried themselves differently than Miller. Clark moved cautiously, his hand resting lightly on his holster, while Hayes approached with confidence, her gaze sweeping the scene. Hayes immediately noticed the standoff. Her eyes locked onto Miller's drawn weapon, then shifted to Nicole, whose hands were still raised in surrender. "What's going on here?" Hayes demanded, her voice firm but controlled. She glanced at Miller, waiting for an explanation. Miller hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the sudden appearance of his colleagues. He lowered his weapon slightly but didn't holster it. "This woman parked illegally," he said, pointing at Nicole's car. "I told her to move, and she refused. Then she started flashing this fake badge around, pretending to be some big shot." Nicole felt a surge of frustration but kept her composure. Now wasn't the time to lose control. She turned her attention to Hayes and Clark, speaking calmly and clearly. "Detective Hayes, Officer Clark, my name is Special Agent Nicole Carter, with the FBI. I am currently conducting official business and stopped here to refuel. Officer Miller approached me aggressively and accused me of parking incorrectly, which is not true. When I presented my credentials, he mocked them and drew his weapon without cause." Hayes frowned, glancing between Nicole and Miller. Something about Nicole's demeanor struck her as genuine. Years of experience had taught Hayes how to read people, and Nicole didn't come across as someone trying to deceive anyone. Still, she needed to verify the facts before jumping to conclusions. "May I see your identification, ma'am?" Hayes asked, addressing Nicole respectfully. "Of course," Nicole replied, slowly reaching for her wallet. She made sure her movements were deliberate and unhurried, aware that Miller was still watching her every move. Pulling out her FBI badge and ID card, she handed them to Hayes, who examined them closely. Meanwhile, Clark stood nearby, observing the situation carefully. He noticed the way Miller hovered anxiously, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. There was something off about his behavior, something defensive, almost guilty. Clark exchanged a quick glance with Hayes, silently communicating his suspicions. After a moment, Hayes nodded. "This appears to be legitimate," she said, handing the badge back to Nicole. Turning to Miller, she added, "Dispatch confirms Agent Carter's identity. She's with the Bureau." Miller's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "You're telling me you believe her over me?" he snapped, his voice rising. "She's lying. That badge is fake." Hayes crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "We'll sort this out properly, Officer Miller, but right now you need to holster your weapon. You're escalating a situation that doesn't warrant it." Miller clenched his jaw, clearly, reluctant to comply. He muttered under his breath but eventually returned his gun to its holster. Even so, his body language remained hostile, his fists balled tightly at his sides. Nicole finally lowered her hands, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Though the immediate threat had passed, she knew the situation wasn't resolved yet. She addressed Hayes and Clark directly, her tone measured and professional. "Thank you for arriving when you did. As I mentioned earlier, Officer Miller drew his weapon on me without justification. This entire interaction has been recorded, including his refusal to acknowledge my authority as a federal agent." Clark raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Recorded?" he repeated. Yes, Nicole confirmed. I activated a recording device on my person shortly after Officer Miller began harassing me. It will provide clear evidence of what transpired here today. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. That's good to know. We'll need to document everything thoroughly. Officer Miller, you'll have to accompany us back to the station to give a statement. Miller bristled at the suggestion. Are you serious? You're taking her side? After everything I've done for this department? This isn't about sides, Hayes replied firmly. It's about following protocol and ensuring accountability. You drew your weapon on a federal agent, a serious violation of policy. Until we get to the bottom of this, you're suspended pending investigation. Miller opened his mouth to protest, but quickly realized arguing wouldn't help his case. Instead, he shot Nicole a venomous glare before reluctantly stepping toward one of the patrol cars. Clark escorted him, keeping a close eye on him as they walked. Once Miller was secured in the back seat, Hayes turned her attention back to Nicole. Agent Carter, I apologize for what you've been through. Please know that incidents like this are unacceptable, and we'll do everything in our power to address it. Nicole appreciated the gesture but remained pragmatic. Thank you, Detective Hayes. While I understand that individual actions don't reflect the entire department, situations like this highlight systemic issues that need to be addressed. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Hayes nodded, solemnly. Absolutely, we'll conduct a full review and ensure proper disciplinary action is taken. In the meantime, if there's anything else you need from us, please let us know. Nicole shook her head. For now, I'd like to retrieve my recording device and submit it as part of the investigation. Beyond that, I'll cooperate fully with internal affairs once they reach out. With that settled, Hayes and Clark prepared to leave the scene, taking Miller with them. Nicole watched as the patrol cars pulled away, their lights casting faint reflections on the gas station windows. The area grew quiet again, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirp of crickets. As Nicole returned to her car, she allowed herself a moment to process everything that had happened. The adrenaline coursing through her veins began to fade, leaving behind a mix of exhaustion and determination. She had faced prejudice before, both subtle and overt, but tonight had been particularly intense. Being held at gunpoint by someone sworn to protect and serve was a sobering reminder of the challenges she faced daily as a black woman in law enforcement. Still, Nicole refused to let fear dictate her life. Every obstacle only fueled her resolve to push for change, whether within the justice system or society as a whole. She climbed back into her sedan, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she took a deep breath. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready to face it, head on. Before driving away, Nicole retrieved her phone and sent a quick text to her supervisor, updating them on the incident. She also forwarded the audio file from her recording device to her personal cloud storage, ensuring it was safely backed up. These small steps gave her a sense of control amidst the chaos. As she finally pulled out of the gas station, Nicole couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. What had happened tonight wasn't just about her. It was about all the others who had endured similar injustices. People who hadn't been believed, who hadn't had backup arrive in time, who hadn't survived to tell their stories. Their voices mattered too, and Nicole vowed to honor them by continuing to fight for fairness and equality. The drive back to headquarters felt longer than usual, but Nicole welcomed the solitude. It gave her time to reflect, to recharge, and to plan her next steps. By the time she arrived, her mind was clear, and her purpose was unwavering. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was prepared to meet them with courage and conviction. When Nicole walked into the office, her colleagues greeted her with concern. Word of the incident had already spread thanks to social media posts from witnesses at the gas station. Some praised her professionalism, while others expressed outrage over Miller's actions. Nicole listened patiently, grateful for the support but focused on the work that lay ahead. She spent the rest of the evening drafting a detailed report of the encounter, attaching the recording as evidence. Every word she wrote was deliberate, aimed at ensuring transparency and accountability. As she hit send on the final document, Nicole felt a small sense of closure. Justice might take time, but she trusted the process and her ability to keep pushing forward. By the time she left the building, the city was bathed in darkness, the streets illuminated only by streetlights and passing headlights. Nicole drove, home in silence, replaying the events of the day in her mind. Despite everything, she felt a flicker of hope. Change was possible, even if it required relentless effort. And Nicole Carter was more than ready to lead the charge. The next morning, Nicole woke up earlier than usual. The events of the previous evening lingered in her mind like a storm cloud, refusing to dissipate. She had hoped that sleep would bring some clarity, but instead, she found herself replaying every detail of the confrontation with Officer Greg Miller. His sneering face, his dismissive tone, and the cold weight of his weapon pointed at her chest. It all felt as fresh as it had been hours ago. After getting dressed in her usual professional attire, dark slacks, a crisp white blouse, and her FBI jacket, Nicole sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She opened her laptop and reviewed the recording she had captured during the incident. Listening to Miller's voice again sent a chill down her spine, but Nicole forced herself to stay focused. This wasn't just about her. It was about accountability. If this evidence could help prevent similar situations from happening to others, then it was worth reliving the discomfort. By the time she arrived at the FBI field office later that morning, news of the incident had spread even further. Social media platforms were buzzing with reactions from witnesses who had filmed parts of the altercation on their phones. Some posts praised Nicole for her calmness under pressure, while others criticized Miller for his blatant disregard of protocol and decency. Local news outlets picked up the story, turning what should have been a routine gas station stop into a headline-grabbing controversy. Inside the office, Nicole's colleagues greeted her with a mix of admiration and concern. "Hey, Nicole," said one agent named Kevin, approaching her desk. "You okay? I heard about what happened last night." "I'm fine," Nicole replied with a small smile. "It wasn't ideal, but I handled it. That's what we're trained to do, right?" Kevin nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Still, nobody should have to deal with something like that, especially not someone in our line of work." Nicole appreciated the sentiment but didn't dwell on it. She knew there was still work to be done. After exchanging pleasantries with a few more coworkers, she retreated to her office to prepare for the inevitable interviews and meetings ahead. Internal affairs investigators from both the FBI and the Maplewood Police Department were scheduled to speak with her later that day, and Nicole wanted to make sure she was ready. Around noon, 2 representatives from Internal Affairs arrived at the field office. One was a middle-aged man named Robert Ellis, known for his meticulous attention to detail. The other was a younger woman named Maria Lopez, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. They introduced themselves politely before sitting down across from Nicole in a private conference room. "Agent Carter, thank you for meeting with us," Robert began. "We understand you've already submitted a written report and provided audio evidence, but we'd like to go over everything verbally to ensure we have a complete picture." Nicole nodded. "Of course. I'll do whatever I can to assist your investigation." For the next hour, Nicole recounted the events of the previous evening step by step. She described how Miller had approached her aggressively, mocked her badge, and ultimately drawn his weapon without cause. She emphasized her efforts to de-escalate the situation and explained why she had activated her recording device. Both Robert and Maria listened intently, occasionally jotting notes or asking follow-up questions. At one point, Maria leaned forward slightly. "Agent Carter, did Officer Miller say anything specific that indicated racial bias?" Nicole hesitated, for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Yes," she admitted. "He questioned whether someone like me, a black woman, could truly be an FBI agent. He also used derogatory language and treated my credentials with skepticism, despite clear evidence of their legitimacy." Maria exchanged a glance with Robert, who frowned deeply. "That kind of behavior is unacceptable," he said firmly, "and we'll make sure it's addressed appropriately." When the interview concluded, Nicole felt a sense of relief. Sharing her side of the story had been cathartic, and knowing that professionals were handling the investigation gave her some peace of mind. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that justice might not come easily. Cases involving law enforcement misconduct often faced resistance, especially when systemic biases were involved. Later that afternoon, Nicole attended a debriefing session with her supervisor, Agent Lisa Monroe. Lisa was a seasoned veteran of the Bureau, known for her no-nonsense leadership style and unwavering commitment to fairness. She wasted no time cutting to the chase. "Nicole, I want you to know that I fully support you," Lisa said, folding her hands on the desk. "What Officer Miller did was completely out of line, and I won't tolerate anyone undermining the integrity of this agency, or targeting one of my agents based on race." "Thank you, Agent Monroe," Nicole replied sincerely. "I appreciate that. But honestly, this isn't just about me. It's about making sure incidents like this don't happen to anyone else." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. And that's why I've reached out to community leaders and advocacy groups. We need to use this moment to spark meaningful change, not just within law enforcement, but across the board." Nicole brightened at the idea. "That sounds promising. What kind of initiatives are you thinking about?" "Well, for starters," Lisa explained, "we're planning a series of workshops and training sessions focused on implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and conflict resolution. These programs will be mandatory for all officers in the area, including those from neighboring departments. Additionally, we're working with local organizations to build stronger relationships between law enforcement and marginalized communities." Nicole smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "That's exactly the kind of action we need. Count me in. I'd love to help however I can." Lisa grinned back. "I was hoping you'd say that. Your experience makes you uniquely qualified to contribute to these efforts. Together, we can turn this unfortunate incident into an opportunity for growth." As the day drew to a close, Nicole left the office feeling cautiously optimistic. While the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she believed real progress was possible, if enough people committed to the cause. On her way home, she stopped at a small cafe to grab dinner. As she waited in line, she noticed several patrons glancing at her curiously. One woman even approached her tentatively. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "Are you the FBI agent from the news?" Nicole nodded, unsure of what to expect. "Yes, I am," the woman smiled warmly. "I just wanted to say thank you for staying calm and standing your ground. You're inspiring a lot of people, you know." Touched by the unexpected compliment, Nicole returned the smile. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." Back at home, Nicole spent the evening reflecting on the day's events. Between the interviews, the meeting with Lisa, and the stranger's kind words, she felt a growing sense of hope. Yes, the system was flawed, and yes, overcoming deep-rooted prejudices would take time. But every small victory counted, and Nicole was determined to keep fighting for a better future. Before going to bed, she checked her phone one last time. Social media was still abuzz with discussions about the incident, but now the tone seemed different. More people were sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination, calling for reforms and expressing solidarity with Nicole. Scrolling through the comments, she came across one post that stood out. To Agent Carter, "Thank you for reminding us that courage and professionalism can shine even in the darkest moments. Your strength gives us hope." Nicole stared at the screen for a long moment, her heart swelling with gratitude. She saved the post to her favorites before setting the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she allowed herself to feel proud of what she had accomplished and hopeful for what lay ahead. As she drifted off to sleep, Nicole reminded herself of something Lisa had said earlier that day. Change starts with action, and Nicole Carter was ready to act. The days following the incident at the gas station were a whirlwind for Nicole. Between interviews with investigators, meetings with her supervisor, and media requests for statements, she barely had time to catch her breath. Yet, amidst the chaos, Nicole couldn't ignore the growing public outcry. Social media posts about her encounter with Officer Greg Miller continued to gain traction, sparking conversations about racism and accountability within law enforcement. The case had become more than just a personal issue. It was now a symbol of the larger struggle for justice. On Thursday morning, Nicole received an email from Internal Affairs notifying her that disciplinary hearings for Miller would begin the following week. While this was a step forward, Nicole knew the process wouldn't be straightforward. Officers like Miller often had supporters who defended their actions, no matter how egregious. She braced herself for criticism and pushback, but she also reminded herself of why she had chosen this career path, to fight for fairness, even when it felt like an uphill battle. Later that afternoon, Nicole attended a community forum organized by Agent Lisa Monroe. The event was held in a large auditorium at a local high school, and the turnout was impressive. Hundreds of people filled the seats, residents of Maplewood, activists, students, and members of various advocacy groups. A panel of speakers, including Nicole, was seated on stage, ready to address the crowd. As Nicole took her seat, she noticed the mix of emotions in the room. Some attendees looked angry, others hopeful, and a few seemed skeptical. She understood their concerns. For years, they had watched similar incidents unfold without seeing real change. But tonight, Nicole wanted to offer them something different. Hope, backed by concrete action. Lisa opened the forum with a brief introduction, emphasizing the importance of collaboration between law enforcement and the community. "We're here because we believe in progress," she said. "But progress requires honesty, effort, and trust. Tonight, let's have honest conversations about where we are and how we move forward." When it was Nicole's turn to speak, she stood up slowly, gripping the edges of the podium. Her heart pounded as she scanned the audience, taking in the sea of faces staring back at her. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "I'll admit I wasn't sure if I should share my story publicly. It's hard enough living through something like this once. Reliving it over and over again is another challenge entirely. But then I realized that staying silent wouldn't help anyone. Not me, not you, and certainly not the countless others who faced similar injustices." Nicole paused, letting her words sink in. "What happened to me wasn't unique. Too many people of color have been treated unfairly by those sworn to protect them. Too many voices have been ignored or silenced. That's why I decided to speak out, not just for myself, but for everyone who deserves to feel safe and respected." She went on to describe the events of the gas station confrontation, carefully recounting how Miller had escalated the situation unnecessarily and mocked her authority. "It wasn't just about me parking too close to the curb," she explained. "It was about power, the misuse of it, the abuse of it. And unfortunately, it happens far too often." The audience listened intently, nodding along as Nicole spoke. When she finished, a wave of applause rippled through the room. Several people stood up, clapping loudly, while others wiped away tears. Nicole felt a lump form in her throat. This moment wasn't just about validation. It was about connection, about realizing that she wasn't alone in this fight. After the speeches, the floor opened for questions and comments from the audience. One young man raised his hand hesitantly. "Agent Carter," he said, standing up, "I appreciate everything you've done, but what can we actually do to make things better? How do we stop these kinds of incidents from happening?" Nicole nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great question," she replied. "Change starts small with education, awareness, and accountability. We need stricter training programs for officers, focusing on bias and de-escalation techniques. We need independent oversight committees to investigate misconduct. And most importantly, we need communities to hold law enforcement accountable while also working together to build trust." Another woman spoke up, her tone passionate. "But what about systemic racism? These problems go deeper than one bad cop." "You're absolutely right," Nicole agreed. "Systemic issues require systemic solutions. That means addressing policies that disproportionately affect marginalized groups, advocating for reforms at every level of government, and supporting organizations fighting for equality. It won't happen overnight, but every step counts." The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, with Nicole fielding questions and offering insights. By the end of the forum, she felt drained but hopeful. People cared, they truly cared, and they were willing to take action. As the crowd dispersed, several attendees approached Nicole to thank her personally. One elderly woman hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're giving us hope." Don't ever give up. The next day, Nicole returned to work, determined to keep the momentum going. She joined a task force created by Lisa to develop new training programs for law enforcement agencies across the region. The team included experts in psychology, sociology, and criminal justice, as well as representatives from local advocacy groups. Their goal was simple yet ambitious: create comprehensive resources to combat implicit bias and promote ethical policing. During one brainstorming session, Nicole shared an idea she'd been mulling over. What if we used real-life scenarios in the training modules? She suggested. For example, we could recreate situations like mine, not to shame anyone, but to show officers how quickly things can spiral out of control when biases come into play. The group liked the concept and began drafting scripts based on actual cases. They also incorporated role-playing exercises where participants would practice de-escalation tactics in simulated environments. Nicole volunteered to help facilitate some of the sessions, believing first-hand experience would add value to the program. Meanwhile, news of Officer Greg Miller's disciplinary hearing dominated headlines. The hearing took place in a packed courtroom with journalists and citizens alike eager to see justice served. Nicole testified via video link, calmly recounting the events of the gas station incident. Her testimony was clear, concise, and backed by the audio recording she had captured. Miller's defense attorney argued that his client had acted under stress and misinterpreted Nicole's badge as fake. However, the evidence painted a damning picture. Not only had Miller violated protocol by drawing his weapon without cause, but his racially charged remarks made it impossible to dismiss the incident as a simple misunderstanding. By the end of the hearing, Miller faced multiple charges, including unlawful detainment, excessive force, and racial profiling. The judge ordered him suspended without pay pending further investigation, and the likelihood of criminal charges loomed large. While Nicole didn't celebrate the outcome, she knew punishment alone wouldn't fix the system. She felt a sense of vindication. Accountability mattered, and Miller's actions had consequences. In the weeks that followed, Nicole threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She traveled to neighboring towns to present the new training program, sharing her story and urging officers to reflect on their own biases. At first, some resisted, dismissing the initiative as unnecessary or overly critical. But Nicole remained patient, using facts and empathy to break down barriers. One particularly memorable session took place in a small rural town where tensions between residents and police ran high. After delivering her presentation, Nicole stayed behind to answer questions. An older officer named Carl approached her hesitantly. "Look," he admitted, "I've been doing this job for 30 years and I never thought I had a problem with, well, race. But listening to you today made me realize maybe I haven't always been as fair as I could have been." Nicole smiled gently. "It's okay to acknowledge that," she said. "What matters is what you do next. Awareness is the first step toward change." Carl nodded, looking thoughtful. "Thanks for saying that. I guess it's never too late to learn, huh?" "No," Nicole replied firmly. "It's never too late." As the months passed, Nicole began to notice subtle shifts, not just in the attitudes of individual officers, but in the broader community. Conversations about race and policing became less taboo, more open. Advocacy groups gained traction, pushing for policy changes at the state level. Even social media played a role, amplifying voices that had long been ignored. Through it all, Nicole remained steadfast in her mission. She knew the journey ahead would be long and challenging, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. Every person who attended a workshop, signed a petition, or simply listened with an open mind contributed to the movement. Together they were building something stronger, something better. Late one evening, as Nicole sat at her desk reviewing notes from a recent training session, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Lisa. "Just got word. The City Council approved funding for a permanent oversight committee. You did it, Nicole. This is huge. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight." But for now, Nicole let herself dream of a future where stories like hers weren't headlines. They were history. Months had passed since the gas station incident, and Nicole Carter's life had transformed in ways she hadn't anticipated. What started as a personal confrontation with Officer Greg Miller had grown into a movement, a push for change that extended far beyond Maplewood. Nicole found herself at the center of it all, not because she sought attention, but because her story resonated deeply with so many people. She had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and the fight for justice. The disciplinary hearings for Miller concluded with a verdict that sent shockwaves through the community. He was fired from the Maplewood Police Department and faced criminal charges for his actions during the altercation. The judge made it clear that such behavior would no longer be tolerated, emphasizing the importance of accountability within law enforcement. For Nicole, the outcome wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about setting a precedent. Officers needed to understand that their actions had consequences, especially when they violated the trust placed in them by the public. But Nicole knew this was only the beginning. Firing one officer wouldn't solve the systemic issues plaguing policing in America. True reform required sustained effort, collaboration, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. That's why she poured her energy into the initiatives, spearheaded by Agent Lisa Monroe and the newly formed Oversight Committee. Together, they worked tirelessly to implement changes that could make a real difference. One of the biggest victories came when the City Council approved funding for mandatory training programs across all law enforcement agencies in the region. These programs focused on implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and de-escalation techniques, areas where many officers lacked adequate preparation. Nicole played a key role in designing the curriculum, drawing from her own experiences and research, conducted by experts in sociology and psychology. She also helped facilitate workshops, using role-playing scenarios to teach officers how to handle tense situations without resorting to aggression. At first, some officers resisted the training, viewing it as an attack on their profession. "We're out here risking our lives every day," one grumbled during a session. "Why are you singling us out?" Nicole listened patiently, then responded calmly. "No one is saying your job isn't hard. In fact, we respect the challenges you face. But part of being a good officer means understanding how your actions affect others. If we can prevent situations like the one I went through, don't you think it's worth it? Wouldn't you want to go home knowing you treated everyone fairly?" Her words struck a chord with many in the room. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. Some officers admitted they hadn't realized how certain behaviors might come across as biased or intimidating. Others shared stories of times they had struggled to maintain composure under pressure. By fostering open dialogue, Nicole helped create a space where learning and growth could happen. Beyond the training programs, Nicole became actively involved in community outreach efforts. She attended town hall meetings, school assemblies, and neighborhood gatherings, always ready to listen and engage. People appreciated her authenticity. She didn't sugarcoat the difficulties ahead, nor did she pretend to have all the answers. Instead, she emphasized the importance of partnership between law enforcement and the communities they served. "Trust isn't built overnight," she often said. "It takes time, consistency, and mutual respect. We need to show up, not just when there's a crisis, but every single day." Her message resonated with both residents and officers alike. Parents thanked her for speaking at their children's schools, while young activists praised her for amplifying their voices. Even skeptics who initially dismissed her as just another bureaucrat warmed up to her once they saw her dedication firsthand. One particularly impactful event took place at a local recreation center. Nicole organized a Meet the Force day, inviting officers to interact with community members in a casual, non-threatening environment. There were games, food trucks, and booths offering information about police procedures and citizen rights. Children laughed as they tried on bulletproof vests and posed for photos with K-9 units, while adults engaged in meaningful conversations with officers about safety concerns and policy reforms. Detective Laura Hayes, who had been among the first responders at the gas station months earlier, attended the event alongside Nicole. As they walked around chatting with attendees, Hayes remarked, You've really turned something awful into something positive. I'm proud to see what's happening here." Nicole smiled, though her expression carried a hint of sadness. It shouldn't have taken something awful to spark these changes. But if it helps even one person feel safer or more respected, then maybe it was worth it. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Still, you deserve credit for pushing so hard. Not everyone would keep going after what you went through." "I didn't have a choice," Nicole replied softly. "If I stopped fighting, who else would?" Despite the progress being made, Nicole knew there was still much work to be done. Racism and bias weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They were deeply ingrained in society, perpetuated by history, institutions, and individual prejudices. Every step forward felt like a battle against centuries of injustice. Yet Nicole refused to let discouragement weigh her down. She reminded herself daily that change was possible, even if it came slowly. Her resolve was tested again when news broke of another high-profile case involving police misconduct elsewhere in the country. A black teenager had been shot and killed during a routine traffic stop, sparking protests and outrage nationwide. Watching the coverage unfold brought back painful memories for Nicole. She couldn't help but wonder if the officer involved had ever received training similar to what she was implementing. Had anyone taught him to pause, to think twice before reaching for his weapon? Determined to channel her emotions into action, Nicole wrote an op-ed for a major newspaper. In it, she recounted her own experience and urged readers to demand better from their leaders. "We cannot wait for tragedy to strike before taking action," she wrote. "Reforms must happen now, not tomorrow, not next year, but today. Lives depend on it." The article went viral, sparking widespread discussion online. Readers praised Nicole for her eloquence and passion, while critics accused her of exaggerating the scope of the problem. But Nicole ignored the negativity, focusing instead on the countless messages of support she received. Many came from ordinary citizens inspired to join the movement, while others were from fellow officers seeking advice on how to advocate for change within their own departments. As the weeks turned into months, Nicole continued balancing her duties as an FBI agent with her advocacy work. It wasn't easy. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but she drew strength from the people around her. Her colleagues at the Bureau rallied behind her, offering encouragement and assistance whenever needed. Friends and family reminded her to take breaks and prioritize self-care, even though she often struggled to follow their advice. One evening, after a long day of meetings and presentations, Nicole returned home to find a package waiting on her doorstep. Curious, she brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a framed piece of artwork, a painting of a sunrise over a city skyline with the words, "Hope starts here," written boldly across the bottom. Attached was a note. "To Agent Carter, thank you for inspiring so many of us to believe in a brighter future. Your courage reminds us that even in the darkest moments, light can break through. Keep shining." With gratitude, the Maplewood Youth Art collective tears welled up in Nicole's eyes as she read the note. She had spoken to the group earlier that year, sharing her story and encouraging them to use art as a tool for activism. Seeing their creation filled her with pride and renewed determination. This was why she kept fighting, for moments like this, for connections like these. That night, Nicole hung the painting in her living room where it caught the soft glow of her table lamp. As she sat on the couch sipping tea and reflecting on everything that had happened, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but she felt hopeful. Change was happening, however slowly, and she was grateful to be part of it. Before heading to bed, Nicole scrolled through her phone, checking updates on various projects she was involved in. One email caught her eye. It was from Lisa Monroe, congratulating her on receiving an award for community leadership. Nicole chuckled softly. Awards weren't what motivated her, but she appreciated the recognition all the same. As she drifted off to sleep, Nicole thought about the future. She imagined a world where stories like hers weren't exceptions, they were expectations. A world where everyone, regardless of race or background, could walk down the street without fear of being judged or mistreated. It was a lofty dream, Perhaps, but one worth striving for. And Nicole Carter, ever the fighter, was ready to keep pushing forward. A year had passed since the gas station incident, and Nicole Carter's life had changed in ways she never could have predicted. What began as a personal ordeal had grown into a movement, a beacon of hope for those who believed in justice and equality. Nicole had become more than an FBI agent. She was now a voice for change, a bridge between communities and law enforcement, and a symbol of resilience. But even as she celebrated victories, she remained grounded in the knowledge that the fight was far from over. The reforms Nicole helped implement were starting to show results. The mandatory training programs had been rolled out across multiple police departments, and early feedback was promising. Officers reported feeling better equipped to handle tense situations without resorting to unnecessary force. Residents, too, noticed a shift. Complaints about misconduct had decreased, and trust in law enforcement was slowly beginning to rebuild. While progress was incremental, it was undeniable. One of the most significant milestones came when the City Council announced the establishment of an independent oversight committee, funded by taxpayer dollars and staffed with community leaders, legal experts, and former officers. The committee was tasked with reviewing complaints against police officers and ensuring accountability. Nicole played a key role in shaping the committee's structure, advocating for transparency and fairness at every step. Her efforts earned her widespread praise, though she consistently redirected credit to the team working alongside her. "Change isn't made by one person," she often said during interviews. "It's made by everyone coming together and refusing to give up." Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Racism and bias were deeply rooted issues, and dismantling them required constant vigilance. Nicole knew that complacency was the enemy of reform. She reminded herself daily that while policies could be rewritten, hearts and minds took longer to change. That's why she continued speaking at events, mentoring young activists, and collaborating with advocacy groups. Her work wasn't just about addressing symptoms. It was about tackling the root causes of inequality. One evening, Nicole attended a gala honoring individuals who had made significant contributions to social justice. She had been reluctant to accept the invitation at first, feeling uncomfortable in the spotlight. But Lisa Monroe convinced her to go, arguing that representation mattered. "People need to see someone like you being recognized," Lisa had said. "It shows them what's possible." The event was held in a grand ballroom decorated with twinkling lights and elegant floral arrangements. As Nicole walked in wearing a simple black dress, she felt out of place among the glamorous attendees. But when her name was called during the award ceremony, the room erupted in applause. Nicole stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding as she accepted the award, a crystal plaque engraved with the words "Champion of Justice." "Thank you," she began, gripping the microphone tightly. "This honor doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone who has stood up against injustice, spoken truth to power, and refused to stay silent. To the activists, the advocates, the educators, and yes, even the officers willing to listen and learn, you are the real champions." Her speech drew a standing ovation, but Nicole didn't linger in the spotlight. After posing for a few photos, she slipped away from the gala early, eager to return to the quiet comfort of her home. Sitting on her couch later that night, she reflected on how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been an FBI agent focused solely on solving cases. Now she was part of something bigger, a movement driven by hope and determination. Following week, Nicole traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress about the importance of nationwide police reform. Her testimony was powerful, blending personal anecdotes with data-driven arguments. She spoke about the gas station incident, the systemic issues it highlighted, and the steps needed to create lasting change. Lawmakers listened intently, some nodding in agreement while others scribbled notes furiously. After her testimony, several representatives approached Nicole to thank her. One senator, a seasoned politician named Senator Harris, shook her hand warmly. "Your courage is inspiring," he said. "We need more people like you leading the charge." Nicole smiled modestly. "Thank you, Senator, but I'm just one piece of the puzzle. Real change happens when we all work together. Back in Maplewood, Nicole resumed her routine, balancing her FBI duties with her advocacy work. She continued, visiting schools, hosting workshops, and attending community meetings. Though her schedule was packed, she found joy in every interaction. Whether it was answering questions from curious students or brainstorming ideas with fellow activists, Nicole thrived on connection. One afternoon, she returned to the same high school where she had spoken at the community forum months earlier. This time she was invited to judge a student debate competition. The topic? How can we build trust between law enforcement and marginalized communities? Nicole was impressed by the participants' insights and passion. Many of them quoted statistics and cited real-world examples, demonstrating a level of understanding that gave her hope for the future. After the event, a group of students approached Nicole to thank her for judging. One girl, a junior named Maya, asked hesitantly, "Agent Carter, do you ever get tired of fighting? Like, don't you ever want to just stop?" Nicole paused, considering the question. "Honestly, sometimes I do feel tired," she admitted. "But then I think about why I started this journey. I think about the people who came before me, the ones who fought for civil rights and equality, and I realize I owe it to them to keep going. Change takes time, but every small step matters." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I want to help too, but I don't know where to start." "You already have," Nicole replied with a smile. "By asking questions, by learning, by caring, that's how you start. And when you're ready, there will be opportunities to do more." As the weeks turned into months, Nicole began noticing subtle changes in Maplewood. Conversations about race and policing became less taboo, more open. Advocacy groups gained traction, pushing for policy changes at the state level. Even social media played a role, amplifying voices that had long been ignored. Through it all, Nicole remained steadfast in her mission. She knew the journey ahead would be long and challenging, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. Every person who attended a workshop, signed a petition, or simply listened with an open mind contributed to the movement. Together, they were building something stronger, something better. Late one evening, as Nicole sat at her desk reviewing notes from a recent training session, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Lisa. "Just got word. The governor signed the statewide reform bill. You did it, Nicole. This is huge." Nicole stared at the screen, her eyes misting with tears. The bill included measures for stricter accountability, improved training standards, and increased funding for community programs. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, a tangible sign that their efforts were making a difference. Leaning back in her chair, Nicole allowed herself a rare moment of pride. She thought about the gas station incident, the fear she had felt, and the strength she had found to stand her ground. It had been a defining moment, not because it defined her, but because it reminded her of why she fought so hard. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, Nicole let herself dream of a future where stories like hers weren't headlines, they were history. She imagined a world where children grew up believing in fairness and equality, where trust between communities and law enforcement was the norm rather than the exception. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Nicole replayed the events of the past year in her mind, from the harrowing encounter with Officer Miller to the triumphs of the Oversight Committee and statewide reforms. Each moment had shaped her in profound ways. She had faced prejudice, fear, and exhaustion, but she had also experienced hope, solidarity, and progress. These experiences reminded her of something vital. Change was possible even if it came slowly, and Nicole Carter, ever the fighter, was ready to keep pushing forward.